Good morning, and thank you, David, and thank you. It's so wonderful to be back here at Thrive. It's always a great community. If you were here a couple years ago, you learned my story, but so much has happened in the last 2 years. I really wanted to give a great update on what the Foundation's work has become and evolved into, and where we are in the project. So I think we'll start there and tell you a little bit about onePULSE. See if I can get it to work. There we go. So here, who we are. One thing to know about the Foundation is that it has what I call the 4 pillars. And they are the Memorial Museum Project and Survivors Walk, our educational programs, and our legacy scholarships. And so in the last, we've been around 5 years, those have really, really evolved, and we've launched all kinds of programming. So talking about each one of the pillars. So the National Pulse Memorial, as you will see, I have a little video, if you haven't seen it yet, what that project looks like, has been coming a long way. All 3 parts of the project, the Memorial, the Museum, and the Survivors Walk, have made it through what they call schematic design, so we are ready to break ground on them. All we really need is to get the funds raised. So as soon as we raise funds, we'll talk about a project timeline as we move on. The onePULSE Academy is our education programming line, and that talks about all the topics you can imagine that we would talk about, any kind of intersectionality, HIV, families, biases, intersections with faith as well as cultures, and we'll talk about those programs as well. And then we're already in Remembrance Week. So what happened in Orlando on year 1 is that because our community is so amazing, because we are just really, really united in lots of ways, and people want to find different ways to commemorate June 12th, everyone wanted to have an event on June 12th. And so the families would travel here and survivors would come, and there would be 12 events on that one day, and they couldn't get to all of them. So we said, let's make a community calendar. And so now we kicked it off yesterday in the early morning. We had a 4.9 community rainbow run, in which 3,000 people participated, 500 virtually and 2,500 in person, which was amazing. And then we have a series of events that lead all the way to the Remembrance Ceremony, which is Sunday night, 7 p.m. at the Pulse Nightclub in Inter Memorial. So in between this whole week, you will find dancing, you will find prayer, you will find art, you will find yoga. You will find something that appeals to you in a way that you come to remember. And so that our community finds it kind of refreshing in a way that not everything is sad, but many things are uplifting in a way to celebrate the life and the memory of what happened here. I talk a lot about the 6 words. The 6 words chosen by Orlando when we started our project 5 years ago. We put out a community survey. And in that survey, we asked people, how do you want to feel when you're here? And I could tell you that families, survivors, first responders, who all had their own codes, right? And then the general public, 2,200 people took that survey. And so they had a bunch of emotions, and you were allowed to choose 6 of them. And so after we tallied all the data, the 6 words that rose to the top were love, hope, unity, courage, strength, and acceptance. That leads everything we do at the Foundation. It leads everything you see at the Memorial Museum and Survivors Walk project, all in our programming. And the reason that those words are important is because I want you to put it in perspective with New York City's project. When 9/11 had surveyed their community after their tragedy, they had the same survey. They gave us their survey. We modified it a little bit and put it out to ours. New York City's 6 words were things like loss, anger, grief, solemn, sadness, right? And so that's how you feel when you go there. Orlando wanted it to be a very different experience. Our families want you to want to come here. Their loved ones were having the time of their lives, and they want you to bring your children and come every year, and to use the space in ways that are not just reflective, but in ways to educate. So that's a little bit about what we're doing in our pillars. If you missed this last year, this was a very big deal. It took us a couple of sessions to get this passed. But President Biden signed the Pulse Memorial into a national designation. So now we can officially use the title, the National Pulse Memorial. It took Stonewall 50 years to get that designation. There are only 2 LGBTQ+ national monuments, and we are one of them. So we're so happy about that. In that picture, you will see families and survivors were there, as well as a lot of the caucus who are LGBT. So looking ahead, let's take a look at the project. We had a large project in mind, and so if you aren't aware of what we did, we had an international design competition. And so in that international design competition, who was led by a team out of New York City, we rendered 68 design teams from 19 different countries. That's how many people wanted to compete to build this. It was, according to our person who coordinated this competition, she was just like, I have never seen the best of the best come together in the way that they did for this project. She says it's an embarrassment of riches what you have. That's how important this project is around the world, and it still is today. We whittled that 68 teams down to 6 in one day. Yes, and there were a family member and a survivor on that jury as well as the final selection. Just as we did with the survey, and as we do with everything else, families first, survivors, first responders, and then general public. So when the 6 finalist teams brought their models here, everyone had their time alone in that space to collect the data of what they wanted and how they felt. And so when the jury met, the jury received how the families and survivors and first responders felt, as well as the public, and a selection was made. And ultimately, that design was chosen by a team out of Paris called Col de Fille. And so that team has grown and has been hard at work the last couple of years. I think most of you in this room know the demographics of Orlando. If you're not from here, you should study them. And the reason I show this slide mostly in my presentations to other people is to realize that we are the most visited city in this country. And this memorial museum project has a huge opportunity to spread not only what happened on June 12th, but what happened after it. And so because we're a very unique space and a very unique community, we feel like people should understand that this is why we're building it. Everyone's like, why are we building this? I'm like, because look at the platform we have to create some real change when people go home and bring it back to their individuals, to their households, to their communities, to their workplaces. We want people to come out of this experience changed. Here's a little video to give you an idea of what, and this was when the design team created the first set of designs. So just have a look. Okay, so don't do the rest of the slides.
Wow.
Thank you.
We're going to talk through the slides, Becca, if you would, for the project itself, so we can, dig a little deeper. That is stunning. That is a huge project.
It really is.
What is the budget for this? It must be astronomical.
It is astronomical.
Yeah.
We set off and we thought with a certain number that we would raise, and then of course COVID happens, and that kind of doubles almost everything we thought. So we know we are planning to. This year's goal is to raise the first 10 million.
Okay.
And that 10 million will help us build the memorial and the Orlando Health Survivors Walk. So if we can, once we raise that $10 million, we will begin constructing this. And then it will take 1 year to get that finished.
And I imagine it being designated a national memorial. Does it come with rules and regulations of any kind, or is it just an appellation? Or?
It doesn't come with any rules or regulations because we're not part of the department of parks.
I got you.
But it also comes with no funding. People thought, oh, they'll fund that. The answer is no, they don't fund it at all. Not $1. But that's all right. I think what it gave us is important. I think for the community, getting that national designation was extremely important.
And you said there were two GLBT, what was the other one? Stonewall.
Stonewall.
Yeah, and that took how long?
50 years.
Wow. Wow,
We got
that's
it
on
on
the fast
their 50
forward.
year.
You can scroll through these
Sure.
if you want, just so we can get an idea of the space.
You can see the cutout of the building, which is actually something we talk about all the time because people, one of the biggest questions they had, are you going to tear the building down? And that was a big question for our community. In the very beginning, in 2017, it was a 50-50 split. And it was even a 50-50 split, like should we reopen it or not?
Right.
And so we decided the building should stay because we were all way too emotional to decide to tear it down. We felt that in 50 to 100 years, when we're no longer here to have this conversation, you can go there and see the size and the scope and be on the sacred space. But the designers felt it would be a really a beautiful experience to be able to create a passageway through the building. So you won't be able to see into Pulse, but you'll be able to take a passageway through a cutout as a journey of quietness, but it's a way to open Pulse up and let light and healing in and give people a separate experience there.
And the colors, I love there's 49 different colors in that circle, right?
Yeah, 49 different colors in that water feature that will surround the building. There's 49 trees on the premise. We have an amphitheater on the side of the building where we'll hold the annual ceremonies where people can still gather. We had to purchase property to make it a little bit bigger because Pulse's property is quite small. If you haven't been to the interim memorial, you'll notice it's very small. And so we've had to make some additional purchases that way.
You can scroll through some
Sure.
more if you want.
So this is the
amazing.
Survivor's Walk. And the reason we decided to make the Survivor's Journey is if you've gone to Oklahoma City or if you've gone to 9/11, you will see a survivor tree there, and that's where they honor their survivors because that tree survived their bombings and their planes, right? See, at Pulse, everything survived. The building survived. Everything was intact externally, of course. And so we decided to think about how do we talk about our survivors? How can we honor them? And so because our Level 1 Trauma Center, Orlando Regional Medical Center, is only 3 blocks away, which is a miracle because the number 49 would have been doubled. Everyone who ran there, got carried there, thrown in the backs of trucks, police cars, however they got to the front door of ORMC alive, lived.
Wow.
And not only that, but that hospital forgave every single doctor bill. And so we really feel that creating a journey that connects the front door to Pulse to the front door of that trauma center is a place to talk about survivorship. Because the doctors and nurses and clergy and 911 call, everyone who was at that hospital had received those families and received our victims. They're intricately tied to this story
Sure.
and forever affected. So this is a 3-block journey that we are transforming into be like an art immersion, which talk about survivorship.
And it's interesting. It's a memorial that celebrates and honors those who died, but it also honors and celebrates those who survived.
Yes,
Yeah.
survived and affected.
Wow.
It talks about what it meant to be a first responder. You have to remember, as people were running out of that building, some people were running into that building. And when that building was, when that shooting was done, people had to go in there and clean that building. And someone had to clean those hospital rooms and those operating rooms. And so there are so many people. People only talk about the 49 so much, and our hearts are with the 49, but everyone that was left behind in the wake of it, that's a whole different conversation, and people don't want to talk about survivorship. People think, oh gosh, it's been 6 years. Isn't everybody over it? No. There's still an empty seat at everybody's table. There's still people walking around with, even though their bullet wounds have healed here, they haven't healed here, right? And so that's a big conversation to talk about survivorship.
That's an interesting thing you just said. People don't like talking about survivorship because it's PTSD, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's revisiting something that was so horrific. There's not words for it. So the scope of this, how much more is this? How many more slides do we have of
I don't
pictures?
know. I think that's it for this part.
Okay,
For survivors.
that is stunning. You talk about the international competition again. I understand you got some huge names in architecture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing. It was just, I mean, I have binders. We had to read, everybody on that jury had to read all 68 submissions. It was thousands of pages and names, and it was incredible. But the sentence you see in front of you took hundreds of hours of listening sessions from our interpretive planning firm out of New York City called Think, led by Tom Hennis, who's a phenomenal gay man who just gets the project. And so he spends hours listening to our stakeholders and to our community. But what do we want this place to do? Because if you go to 9/11, you go to Oklahoma City or Shanksville or any other National War Museum, they're only about the day of. Right. You walk in, and that's it. You're walking through the day of 9/11, every minute, by second. And our community said no. No, there's a place for that, right? But there's a place to talk about history, and there's a place to talk about all kinds of other things. So they spent hundreds of hours listening, and this is what they surmised out of those hours. And it's a pretty interesting sentence. This is what's kind of what happened when you go inside. Right. And we call this one center the Agora when you walk in to the museum. And it's about, who we are today. Who are you as you walk into this place? And you can put your hand on the sensor, and it'll read your heartbeat, and it'll fly right up through it and join all the other heartbeats, so that shows how y'all are more alike than different, and how you have one pulse. We're going to talk about the joy of pulse. We're going to have drag queen costumes, right? And why not just Pulse on the corner of Orange and Cayley was important, but why every gay nightclub was important to this community. So to stay on that for just a second, give the crowd, because you and I have had this discussion, but tell them the quick genesis story of Pulse Nightclub and your brother. Well, I had the honor and the blessing to grow up with a gay brother. So John was 4 years older than me. So growing up with him was fantastic, and it was fabulous. I thought everyone should have a gay brother. And so I was just born into allyship. It's just who I am. It's part of how I grew up. And so when we lost John in the AIDS epidemic in the early 90s, I lost my connection to the community I loved very, very much, and was my normal. And then I had an opportunity that came our way from a dear friend of ours who said, he wanted to own a gay nightclub. My husband was like, yeah, I'm good. I don't think I need to do that. I'm an ally and all, but I don't want to do that. And so I kind of just was like, And so my friend said, I bet your Barbara would do it. Because we had multiple businesses here in Orlando anyway. And I ran them all operationally. That was what I did. My husband was a creator, and I was the operator. Right. So he said, if you'll operate this, I'll let you have it. And I was like, yes. And so Pulse became my baby that way. And talk about the clientele. It wasn't just it was really a meeting place, a gathering place, families, People came with their moms in there, and it was people used to hang out with family members and a lot of allies and non-gay, right? Yeah, that was really important to us. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't just LGBTQ plus specific. We wanted people to be proud to bring their families there, because most gay bars were not, and so we made sure that it was a really diverse community. Inside, you would see lesbians and gay men dancing on the same dance floor, bears and twinks, and they were on the bars, they were off the bars, they were on the dance floor, and that was how it was every single night. And so we just changed the music format. But I think that, especially for Latin Night, the community is a community who dances together and celebrates together. So it seems like the design and thinking of this is really a reflection of what Pulse was as an entity, correct? Yeah, that was part of the RFP and Q. Mm-hmm. Was understanding that. Is this some Liebeskin, this design? No, Liebeskin did compete, but this is Koldefee who won. Okay. Wow, that's a huge project. So yeah. $10 million in the first session, or I should say the first go-round. First part, yeah. Yeah. And it's a multi-phase. Do we have an overview of the? I saw a different slide. Let me see. This is what will, of course, be inside the museum. It's quite an amazing structure, really. This is the Agora I was talking about. So inside the center of the museum, there'll be we call it the Tower of Memory. So on every floor, the tower will have different exhibits throughout each floor, depending on what's on there. But this is how you can look up to the sky from the bottom floor. Talks about what will happen downstairs. Talks about the joy of Pulse. That is actually if you ever went to Pulse in the very beginning, that is a kind of rendering of the White Room that used to exist. That was kind of infamous for. We're talking about brave spaces and safe spaces and belonging and family and home. We'll have a story bar instead of a liquor bar, right? So we'll be telling stories there. We'll have a story tender to talk about stories of the LGBTQ community and of Pulse, and of all kinds of other items, and whether it be eyelashes or drag shows. So it's going to be exciting. History. You cannot understand how the magnitude of what June 12th meant to the community unless you understand its struggles and its successes and its obstacles all the way through it. And that's going to be a never-ending story. And I think that what's going to be really interesting about what happens at the Pulse Museum is that it's always going to be different because history is still being written every single day.
Sure.
And so it's going to be able to accumulate that and constantly change with it. On the third floor of exhibits is where you'll find the angels. That's where you'll find the stories of June 12th, but again, only on half the floor, so people don't have to relive June 12th if they don't want to, and some children of a certain age shouldn't go through that exhibit, right?
Oh, that's interesting. So they can skip this completely.
Skip it completely if you'd like to.
But
what you can see on that floor that's all open is the response of the world.
Got you.
And you'll see the love, you'll see the joy, you'll see all of that coming together to see how we did it so differently in Orlando and how the world came together.
So this is interesting. And you actually made an interesting point about the 9/11 memorial in New York and the celebration of that day and that act, right? And not necessarily in anything in this scope. It was a different scope of event. It was a different intentionality. But I was in New York on 9/11, and I lived less than a mile from there, and it really did scar that city in a very profound way. The interesting part, and why I believe it took so long for them to figure out what to do, was New York really is not a city of memorials. You know, in America, our city of memorials is Washington, D.C., right? And New York is forever changing and knocking something down, build something new. And I think they really had a hard time as a city, speaking as a New Yorker of 15 years, figuring out how to address that and how to incorporate it into the fabric of the city. I think what they chose, the permanence of it is astounding, and the magnitude of it is it just has this aura about it. But when I'm looking at this project and the thinking behind this project, this is really a celebration and looking forward, and not necessarily. I love the idea that if you don't want to go to the floor of the day of, you can skip it and just enjoy the experience.
Yeah, we felt it was really important for people of all ages and places, and again, for survivors to be able to come in and use the space, whether they want to come to the auditorium for an event, or if they want to go to the rooftop for another, to not always have it in their faces, that sorrow, that triggering moments. And again, we want it to be a place of teaching and a place of change.
Complex conversations,
yeah,
right?
I mean, so there's just so much to happen there. There's a whole floor that'll be dedicated to kind of more temporary, more traveling or exhibit spaces or conversations or events like LGBTQ plus different artists from around our country and around the world. And that art can be not just in paintings, right? It could be in spoken word. It can be in audio. There's so many different mediums that could express the LGBTQ community. But
what do we got next?
I don't know. Let's see. I think we have this.
Oh man, I read this and I had to stop it because I would break up on it. So it's and you take these words and this homage to the people. These are survivors' words.
This is a letter that a mother had just left at the memorial. She sat and she wrote while she sat there. I could tell you that this memorial already changes hearts and minds. I have been witness to it. I could tell you I tour groups there all the time. And whether they come from Dell or Microsoft, or Alex Partners, BBYO, the Jewish youth groups. And there's all kinds of people who call us. Like today, Visit Orlando's bringing 2 tour buses. UCF's bringing 2 tour buses this week. I mean, we just constantly are giving. People want to come there. So one day, I was doing a tour with Emergency Nurses Association. And so their executive committee had come down prior to take the tour to see how just the logistics of everything and see how they were going to put it into their meeting. So as I'm doing this tour, I noticed there's this one African-American gentleman who's completely disengaged. And I'm like, okay, well, I can't be judgy because I'm not supposed to be judgy, right? But I'm thinking, what are you doing here? You're going to be like that. But I always think, is it hard for you? Are you triggered? Did you know someone? What's happening to this person? And so I try to be sensitive because I have had people completely break down. We've had people had to walk away, and so we understand the space is hard. So I've watched this gentleman. He stands behind the offering walls, and he actually gets on his phone and walks away. I'm like, oh, that's all kinds of rude. Right. Something that better be a serious emergency. And so 2 weeks later, we received a letter from him letting us know that he and his father had been estranged from his gay brother for many, many years, and their father had since died and never had reconnected with his son.
Wow.
And when he was standing on the Memorial Plaza, the inter-memorial, just looking at the photos, he said, I felt like I could see my brother's face in every photo. And I had to call him. And he did right there. That's the phone call he did. He stepped away, and he's been reconnected with his brother. And so I could tell you that the space already changes people, and I can only imagine what the new spaces are going to be able to do.
That the scope of that, and the nuance of it, and the intimacy of it, and the kind of the forward thinking of it. And clearly, you've spent hours and hours and hours and years putting this together. Mm-hmm. How big is the onePULSE Foundation? How many people are working on this?
Well, right now I think we're a staff of 14. We've grown to 14. But we have committees. We've got some serious committees in there. These are people, besides our board, who are, when we were only 4 staff members, and we had a board of 20, those board members worked. But now our committees have grown. Our design and construction committee's got 15 different people. Some are local, some are global, some are national. So they come together, and whenever we need someone with a certain expertise, I could tell you something that's really comforting to know. It's like when we were studying flow in the museum, the pro forma has been done. Thank you, executives, another executive team from Disney who came together and said, okay, let's help you build a 40-year pro forma. And they're like, okay, this is the size of the building. This is how many floors, this is entrances, square footage, and how many people can we put in there? And so then another executive team from, I think it was Universal Studios, came together and did flow analysis. No matter who you ask, they say yes. And so I find that, to me, inspiring and hopeful that people just want to lend their time and talent to this project. And so there's tons of people working on it on a volunteer basis with their expertise.
How interesting that a theme park would have an input on something like this, but it makes perfect sense.
Perfect
right?
sense.
Yeah.
They know how many people how to park them, how to get them ticketed entry. They know how to get them through, do you need escalators and how many on a floor and how many entrances and how many staircases. That's their science.
So for you, this is your 24/7. This is your thing now, right? You're committed to this. This is, you are pushing this forward and pulling it and doing the fundraising and the floor sweeping and everything. I mean, it seems the volume and quantity and quality of different things you do in support of this is impressive, to say the least. And you and I talked briefly about this the other day, and we won't go too deep into it, but what is your thought process? What goes through your mind when you happen to be, through just fate, associated with one of the largest mass shootings in the history of the country, and they still continue to this day? I know it's not a gun advocacy thing. I know you guys don't swim in that political pool, but what do you think when you see this continuing?
It was a really rough week, just after Buffalo and then Uvalde. I could tell you that me and my entire team, we had to spend literally one whole team meeting just crying. We just sat there and cried, and we just kind of felt helpless. It's hard because it's not the lane we're in, and so we even feel extra helpless. And then we try to remind ourselves of the good that we're doing in our lane, in our mission. We talk about the work that we are doing in our education programs, and we see that, but I can't tell you that we're unaffected by it. Every single shooting, I get alerts on my phone. I wish I didn't, but I get alerts, and I just pick it up, put it down, and I just need a minute because I can't. It's when you are frontline affected, it does something different to you. And I think it was Uvalde that I was laying in bed with my husband, and I said to him, I go, how do you think people feel who are like us, who weren't affected by something? He's like, I don't know how those people feel. I don't know how you feel, but when it's happened to you and it has changed your life, it has changed your family, it has changed everything about you here, it's like reliving it every day because we know what that community is going to do. I see those flowers, I see those crosses, I see those weeping, I see the signs. And I just think, oh my God, it's 6 years and we're still doing it. I can only imagine how the Columbine kids feel. Right?
And that, when you continue doing what you do in such a way like this, I'm really impressed by how forward thinking it is, how and maybe this is the wrong word, but how celebratory it is, of not celebrating the act, of course, but celebrating the spirit of Pulse and the larger spirit of LGBTQ+ and inclusion and diversity. It's a very big statement.
It is, and I think the bigger statement, and maybe this does pertain to the violence in our nation right now, is that one of our key targets is working on the concept of belonging. And no one wants to talk about the perpetrators, right? But I know that if you look back at every single one of them, they were looking for a place to belong. And look where they wound up fitting into those hate groups, right? And finding just being such loners that they didn't feel like they belonged somewhere. And so how do we teach people to reach out to those people that you see sitting by themselves that seem a little different, not very well connected? I mean, they call them lone wolves for a reason. There's not one shooting I have watched and studied that they didn't go, oh, yeah, he was that. Yeah, I guess I saw that coming, you know. Not one time was it really a surprise to anyone who went to school with that person, who knew that person, who sat next to them in a cubicle. Our shooter alone was on the watch list twice. We've got to figure out how to make every human being feel like they belong to something good.
Amen. That's a beautiful statement. Your educational outreach, that is part of the foundation. Talk me through the scholarships. I love this idea of the scholarships.
Yeah, so the scholarships are super, to me, that's something that fills me up every single year when I get to do that. So when we were meeting with the families about the project, and every year we have our remembrance ceremony like we're going to do on Sunday, we read the names, right? We show their photos. And in the museum, we will tell their story. They will have a box where you can learn more about them, and the parents can curate that for them. And so, but they kept saying, they're just more than a name that you read on June 12th, Barbara. They're more than just a picture on a wall. They were people. They had lives. They had jobs. They had careers. They had aspirations. And some of them reached it, and some of them didn't. Amanda Alvier, who wanted to become a nurse, didn't get a chance to become that nurse. And so her mother designated her scholarship to nursing. So we have 49 individual scholarships, one in each one of the victims' names, up to $10,000 a year. We had funded already 3 cycles. Some have been reoccurring, which has been really nice. And so they range from cosmetology all the way up to law school and med school. So it's undergraduate, trade school, graduate school. You don't have to be LGBTQ+. It doesn't have to be in the state of Florida. All you need to go to is an accredited school.
Those last 2 points are amazing. You don't have to be LGBTQ+. You don't have to reside in the state of Florida. These are scholarships for anybody who can apply and really participate in that. That's such a beautiful idea. And is that part of the general fund, or is there a separate fund just for the scholarships?
Well, we have a separate fund for it, but sometimes we have to fund it from our general place, right. Whatever it is we get them funded. So we have, like I said, we have funded almost $1 million so far in 3 years. So that's $978,000. I think we have funded in 3 years.
So project us into the future, 3, 5, 10 years, your best case scenario. Mm-hmm. Where are we with the project? What is Orlando going to look like? I really love to raise that $10 million this year, okay, so that I could have the memorial and the Survivors Walk opened in 2024. And then Orlando is, got 2 bids out for world events. So in 2026, which is the 10-year mark for the Pulse shooting, we have a bid out for World Pride. World Pride, yeah. And World Cup Soccer. We are getting calls. People want to make reservations or make events at the museum already. So we would love to have that education center and open by 2026, by our 10-year. So that is our goal. But it's a large raise. I always say, got $100 million to raise, and they're like, $100 million. I'm like, well, no, that's in its entirety. That is not just the museum. It's not just the Survivors Walk and Memorial. It's scholarships. Right? It is educational programming. It's endowment to make sure that this place can stay and grow and be solid. Your the 6 keywords. When you said them, I wrote them down, but I missed one. Love, hope, faith, unity, acceptance. What was the other one I'm putting in?
Love, no faith. Love, hope, courage, strength, acceptance, and unity.
Strength, acceptance, unity. And you really worked hard getting those words together. We did. I mean, because they're each unique silos, but they're still somehow related. Those are pretty much your mission statement. Those are the core of everything you do.
They do. They were the core of the International Design Competition. They're the core of the design of the Inter-Memorial. They're the core of all the programming we do. We choose a word every year. This year it's unity.
Love this year.
We needed it this year more than ever.
I want one of those shirts.
All right.
Okay. Right.
Last year we chose love for our theme because it was a 5-year, and the V symbolized 5 in Roman numerals, so that was our word last year. But everything we do is centered around those words.
That is it's so heartening for our first conversation. This is our second conversation in public, but to see the growth and the refinement of the concept. It went from, hey, let's do something, to we're doing this very specific thing, to we're putting it out to the world and we're getting some of the biggest architects in the world, to it being a dedicated national memorial by you have really so quickly, honestly, checked some huge boxes for this. What are your biggest boxes outside of funding going forward?
I think that's it. I mean, we are ready. We are ready. It's been quite a journey, and people here in Orlando are like, it's already year 6 and this isn't built yet. Is it ever going to happen? Right. Orlando's starting to feel that way, and I try to remind them, I'm like, at year 5, New York was trying to still figure out if it was 1 incident or 2. They're still fighting over property. And so we are here. I could tell you that Parkland and Vegas, if you don't know this, the memorial world, we're all connected to each other. We all help each other, just like those helped us. We help others. So Parkland and Vegas have reached out to us. They're like, you guys did a really good job. How did you do that? And so we're helping them. And they happened just shortly after us. They haven't even put out an RFP yet.
Okay.
And so they're trying to figure out how to do that. And they're also being run by their governments and municipalities, which is a horrible way to do these projects. And so we got a lot of scrutiny when we didn't do it that way, but that's how we were taught. And so people don't realize that these projects take time. And while there's an outpouring of funds when your tragedy happens to your community, it's very different after that. Yeah. And because they continue happening in all these other communities, right?
That's kind of the sad point.
Yeah.
That it keeps going on and we keep having more memorials to build. If you look at those numbers specifically, 76 million visitors to Orlando each year, $1 each, that's 76 million right there.
I know.
I mean, this is a hugely touristed area. My background is destination marketing in Florida, in these areas, working with the bed tax, working with people who understand what this would mean for not only Orlando, but for Florida in general, particularly in light of what we talked about yesterday. Nadine Smith was here yesterday, right, and put a flag squarely in the ground about our need to continue the conversations, our need to not take anything for granted, our need to, always speak up. Silence is not an option. So I think if we put the right energies together and keep this conversation going, I believe those fundings will come together for you.
We hope so. We have spent this last year putting together like a national campaign where I have been going to targeted cities, and we tried to find an anchor in each city. We've identified, I think, 10. I've gone to New York, I've gone to Louisville, and I've been to New York and LA and a little bit of San Francisco, and we're trying to put together volunteer committees who, like, each person would agree to raise a certain dollar amount and then help us raise our subject, because the money is then going to come from Orlando. Yep. It's going to come from the country. And we need every LGBTQ plus person to step up and do it. And not only that, but I always say the gays can't do it all by themselves. People, we're the allies. And so, it's important for us. So if you're not from here, you're from a city, and you think that you might be able to introduce us to people in your city, we'd love to come out there and do that. I think it's building pockets of allies around our country, because not only do we have to get it built, but we have to get it sustainable. And so I don't want it to open and be like, how come no one came to my city? No one asked me. How can I be a part of this? Trust me, everyone can do something.
And sustainable, that's the word. Mm-hmm. It's not just raising that first 100 million. It has to be a sustainable thing moving forward. It has to be a growing, living, breathing thing. It has to be. Becca, can we forward one more of the slides? There's a QR code, I think, on that one right there. So people ask all the time, how can they help? That's it right there. If you want to share that on social or take a picture of it, or you can get it on the website.
Oh yeah, it's right on the website too. But yeah, share away.
It is a huge project, as you saw. The scope of this project is impressive. I love how aspirational it is. I love that it's not just a memorial of the day, but a celebration of diversity that will continue on and on, far past the one horrific act of violence. What's happened on June 12th this year?
So there's a few things happening on that day. One is that if you're in downtown, then we have a beautiful Methodist church across the street from where our offices are, who tolls the bells 49 times, reads the names, and tolls a bell for each one. So that's a really solemn way to kick off your June 12th. And then we have a special dinner for the families and survivors alone, and then we bus them to the memorial. So then we'll have our June 12th remembrance ceremony at 7 p.m. on site. It's open to the public. If you're not here by then, you can also stream it. The year that we were completely virtual, 2020, we had to do the virtual ceremony. We had over 66,000 households across our country watch it.
Wow.
When we announced the final design, it was 1.6 billion media impressions. There have been 5 times in the Foundation's history that we've reached over 1.5 billion media impressions. Everything we do, it's amazing to me. First of all, I didn't know what that meant when this started. And then the first time we hit over 1 million, people are like, we hit 1 million. I'm like, oh, all right, is that good? What does that mean? This is not my world. And then when we started hitting in the billions and over 1.5 billion on them, it goes to show you that people have not forgotten the importance of what happened.
What is your thought process on June 12th? I mean, you just must be torn in so many different directions.
Yeah, to me, that day is for the stakeholders. And so for me, I'm there to serve them, and we're there to serve them. So I do that all day. And then I take June 13th for me. That's it for me. I just shut my office down. We'll be closed for 3 days because this little mighty team of 14 has handled 35 events from yesterday to June 12th. And we just need time to recover because it's really just a giving time. I feel like all we do is we put out this whole week. And I try not to focus on what it means for me until later.
I got you. Well, we so appreciate you carving out time to be with us today. We're so happy to make you part of this conference. We're happy to be here in Orlando with you. We're happy to spread the word to support the onePULSE Foundation in this stunning project. And you just continue to be such an impressive and an amazing mouthpiece for the organization and for diversity. I think your story needs to be told over and over again. Please give it up. Nice round of applause. Barbara Poma. Barbara, thank you.